So the state of design tells us that we need to be able to talk about just 3 challenges. We had about 10 on our list then. We only need to know 3. And the good news is, all 3 of those we're going to do again in area of study 2, 3, and 4. So we actually get to duplicate them. So the knowledge will be reinforced. We're going to start with regional groups, and then we'll probably only do regional groups today. A review of sovereignty, we've just done sovereignty, so there's no need. States with authority and representing their authority.
So you say it's a state, that's not a group of people.
We're talking about states having their sovereignty challenged. Because this dot point is challenges to state sovereignty.
But when we define sovereignty, we say like a state with recognised authority.
Yes, you'll talk about states. It's called challenges. I haven't put it on my portal. I was editing it up to lunchtime. I didn't think we'd get up to it.
What's the new organisation?
Alright.
I
So,
should write that down.
this is just setting a bit of context. Alice and Coco. So, there's a question that lots of international relations and diplomats are talking, and that is the state in decline? They're wondering, is the state really this almighty powerful entity, a global actor with all this power? We've got new organisations like the European Union and ASEAN. ASEAN's in our region. We've got new global actors like TNCs, which are huge. 100 years ago, we never anticipated that we have TNCs that are bigger than most states in terms of their economies. And we've got global challenges like we've never had before. 15 million refugees looking for a home. You've got, what is it, I think 1 billion or 2 billion people living below the poverty line. AIDS rampant in many states in Africa. You've got the threat of nuclear weapons. You've got bombs going off in populated cities. Madrid, London, New York. So you've got all these threats, in particular over the last 20 to 30 years, that all challenge a state's sovereignty, and they beg the question, is the state in decline? So this is the context for this, challenges to the state. Regional groups. State sovereignty can be challenged by delegation. So when you delegate something, you give up power voluntarily. So you say, maybe I can't do this particular thing now, I'll get someone else to do it for me. In the case of regional groups, you're passing power upwards.
Is this under challenges?
Yes. So this is one of the 3 challenges. This is the challenge of regional groupings.
So there's 3.
Yes. So the first one is about states voluntarily giving up their power. And the best example is the EU. 27 states in Europe have agreed to give up their power. They're giving up sovereignty to the EU, and they're saying, let's form a regional group. We'll pool our sovereignty, we'll pool it together so we've got more of it together collectively. And as a collective, they make decisions that they all have to abide by. And I've got an example in a moment to make that point, actually. No, I can't click on that. It's the next slide. This one's not on my portal yet, sorry. I've just been editing it.
Just one question. When we write state, do you have capital?
No.
No?
I've got a couple of things about using capitals and nouns and pronouns, so no. If you refer to Australia, yes, but sovereignty is just a noun, it's not a proper noun, so small s.
No, as in the word state.
Same thing, it's a noun, it's not a proper noun.
Why would someone give up their power?
That's a good question.
How like you're stronger in the group?
Well, it's because, yeah, they become stronger. So Portugal on its own has some power and authority, but if it combines with 26 other wealthy European states, they've got more economic power. If they combine all their militaries together and they sign a treaty or an agreement, now they've got a stronger military force.
And they can help you out.
They can help each other out economically. They can agree on issues around border controls. So all these states have been desperate for ages to get into the EU. This one on this side you've probably never heard of. We're going to get to know it better. It's called ASEAN. Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Association Southeast Asian Nations. Don't worry for now, you don't need to know that much. But it's 10. It's 10 states, and they're all in our region. Indonesia, right above us, and all these other states. We're not in it. In part, this was formed to counter some of the other dominant players in the region, and we're definitely a dominant player. So we've been pushing around other states in our region for a while. This group is pooling their sovereignty to counter that push. So they're being pushed from the north from China, they're being pushed from the east by the US, they're being pushed from the south by Australia. So these weaker states pool their sovereignty together to try and be more powerful. All right, let's look at the right-hand side. So these are the conditions to enter the EU. Member states must meet the Copenhagen criteria. Adherence to a single market. So you've got to give up your local currency. It's a monetary union, it's the euro. Adoption of EU laws, which when in conflict with state laws, take precedence. And that's the biggest one. So if your government, you elect the French government to pass French laws about education. And then the EU Parliament passes European laws. If your laws clash, the European laws are the ones that stand. So you know how we just talked about sovereignty being about the right to pass laws? You've given up that right if you've joined this particular regional group. It's a big deal, and lots of European states are now talking about pulling out of the EU because they're sick and tired of things that they value being undermined by the European Parliament.
What's the bonus?
Sorry, hand it back.
Like the EU law is different from like the states within the EU.
Yes. So there's European Parliament, and that almost sits above all the individual state parliaments.
But like the states within the EU can still have their own laws. Like there's still.
Yes, but if they clash and it gets taken to the EU Court of Justice or whatever it's called, they'll make a ruling always in favour of the European Parliament. Now, the European Parliament is made up of delegates from each of those states, but as a whole they vote together.
What's the law from states? Like why are they doing it?
Okay. The main reason was always economic. So weaker European states could join the union, they can get rid of their weak local currency. So you guys, actually no, none of you would have travelled through Europe when there were different currencies. It was so frustrating at every border to have to change your money into a new currency. You'd always end with leftover coins, or you'd find notes from 2 countries earlier and you couldn't use them. They still have their own?
No, they've got the euro now.
The euro now. Do you remember?
Yeah.
The pound's an exception. The UK has kept itself outside monetarily, but in every other way, it's in. So economic benefits is the big one. There are huge benefits in terms of trade. So you get rid of trade barriers by joining together. It increases intra-EU trade. 1, 2.
Yeah, not all the countries in the EU and the Eurozone, though. So how's that?
No, so there's, I think
There's
it's
only like
20,
17 or something.
17 have adopted the euro, and I think there are another 10 who are in the Eurozone. There are a couple of conditions.
And then aren't there a few countries in the Eurozone that aren't in the EU? It's where there's like 1 or 2.
No, the other one is true. So yes, there are some that haven't adopted the euro, but all the ones in the Eurozone are members of the European Union. We don't need to go into this much detail.
Yeah.
We don't need to be experts in the EU at all. We simply have it as an example of a challenge to state sovereignty.
I was just wondering for powerful countries. No. You can actually keep doing this on the record.
Yep. Well, there are benefits to them in terms of trade, because they can sell their goods easily to other states. But because they're a union, they can also lend money to those weaker states and make money more easily. So they're making money off the increase of interest rates.
So Great Britain is.
Here's an example. Fish quotas. Well, let's start with the Common Agricultural Policy. instead of 27 different agricultural policies, there is one set of agricultural laws for all of the states in the EU. So they've all given up the right to pass their own agricultural laws. They've given up power and authority. The more specific example that I'd like you to use in the future is fish. And I'll play in a second, but in short, there are a set of European fishing laws, and every state in the EU has to abide by those fishing laws. The French fishermen can't do what they want. The European laws take precedence.
Do they have a common system like weighing and, you know?
I don't know all the different sets of laws, so I don't know about weights and measurements, and I don't know. There are so many different areas of legislation. They just passed one about olive oil. Anyway, olive oil. Common laws around olive oil in the EU. So this is fish. This is going to be your example.
The number one challenge for European fisheries is to address the persistent imbalance. Too few fish in the sea and too many fishing boats on the sea.
Right. Let me just pause. So she said too many fishermen or fishing boats, too few fish. So they've recognised a problem. They've got Europe, they've got the Mediterranean, the North Sea. They have a problem. Overfishing. They're actually stronger as a union in terms of solving that problem because they can impose a law on all the states. Australia can't solve the world problem of overfishing. We can only control our waterways. So there are benefits to giving up some sovereignty.
To put an end to over-exploitation of this resource, the European Commission wishes to reform the common fisheries policy. The objective is to re-establish plentiful stocks, a growing fishing industry and sustainable fishing.
We can fish, but at the same time we have to leave the stocks the capability to reproduce and be at a healthy state.
In order for there to be more fish in the sea, the absolute rule would be that of maximum sustainable yield, and multi-annual plans would become the priority method to enable more stocks to achieve this yield.
Todos los Estados miembros deberían poner muchos más medios económicos y humanos para que tengamos una ciencia que pueda dar cobertura a la gestión.
To preserve these stocks, the discarding of bycatches will gradually be banned, certainly as far as commercial species are concerned. To reduce the number of boats on the sea, the system of transferable catch or efforts quotas would make for a more rational management of the fleet. Under this system, ship owners would be able to group together their quotas on fewer boats, thus ensuring their profitability.
If there is a move towards tradable quotas, it's very important not to have the kind of concentration of ownership.
Boats under 12 meters in length with passive fishing gear would not be subject to transferable quotas, so as to maintain the rights of small-scale fishing, which would have its own system of fleet and resource management.
Noi crediamo che la politica debba essere separata, specifica per la piccola pesca, perché le esigenze, le caratteristiche anche del naviglio siano specifiche e meritino una considerazione molto diversa da quelle della pesca industriale.
Aquaculture should become a priority so that it can find its place in the coastal economy. The member states should draw up their national strategic plans to facilitate the development of their aquaculture industry. Finally, fishery governance should be decentralized. The European Union would limit itself to setting objectives and schedules, while practical measures would be decided by member states at fishery level, by involving fishermen in a system of co-management.
Vi ser det som en mulighed for, at fiskeindustrien kan få større indflydelse på processer, som betyder noget for deres hverdag.
The Commission has submitted its proposal to the Member States and the European Parliament. The future of the common fisheries policy is now in their hands.
So in short, states give up their sovereignty and join a regional group. The regional group passes laws about a particular issue, like fishing. All of the states have to abide by that set of laws. This is an example of a regional group threatening the sovereignty of states. Now in this example, states have chosen to give up that sovereignty. Nobody forced Spain to join the EU. Nobody forced Croatia to join the EU. Doesn't mean they won't suffer. Spanish fishermen might not be able to fish anymore because of these laws, but the state decided to join the EU. And in most states in Europe, the population actually votes in a general election whether they want that state to join the EU. So the British are about to have a vote in the next 6 months about getting out of the EU.
Sure.
Will they vote? I don't know which way they'll vote.
For the regional group,
So there's three challenges to sovereignty. We've done the first one, regional groups. The second one, contested and changing borders. So borders can be challenged internally from within the state and externally from groups outside of the state. Internally, you might have a group that seeks independence. They want to separate, they want to secede. The West Papuans want to secede from Indonesia. Palestinians want to secede from Israel. The Kurds want to secede from Turkey. So these are internal challenges within the state. We don't have any in Australia. There are no groups, no people in a certain territory who want to secede. Even the Indigenous people don't claim to want their own state. I think they've realised that ship has long sailed. It can also be challenged externally from outside of the state. And that's when you have war, interstate war. So when states, other global actors infringe on the territory of another state. An example is the South China Sea. Another example, the Iraq War. So the coalition of the willing, Australia, the US, UK, we were an external threat to Iraq's sovereignty. We invaded, we occupied the state. You could say the Japanese attack on Darwin was an external threat to our sovereignty. They were challenging our borders. So the external one is almost always interstate conflict. Why are these challenges? Because the borders or territory of the state are being challenged. So you lose power and authority. When we controlled Iraq, Iraqis didn't have power and authority, we did. When war happens, usually there's occupation. If you're occupying a foreign state, that foreign state no longer has power and authority. So it's probably the most simplistic one, that when borders are challenged, territory is challenged, someone is going to lose some power and authority. Internal. This is Indonesia, broken up into nations, just like we had Australia broken up into nations last lesson. And this in the green is West Papua. Actually, no, I just realised that's not right. That's West Papua. Someone has highlighted this differently. This is West Papua. These people want to secede, they want to separate. They're internally, within the state, they're challenging the state. And it's pretty obvious, if they were given independence, Indonesia would lose power and authority over this whole region. It's a threat, a challenge to Indonesia's sovereignty.
It's the land, right?
It's incredibly well. Yeah, when we do TNCs, we'll look at Rio Tinto, which has all these mines in this region. And it's got some of the it's got the richest gold mine in the world and some of the richest copper mines in the world. Incredibly wealthy region, but deep in the mountains. So yes, it's a wealthy region. I mean, the people are poor, they're dirt poor, but we go in there and we take out all the resources, we ship them to Australia. A short video about the West Papuans challenging
West Papua has 3 million people and great natural resources, but many here dream of independence from Indonesia, something the authorities in Jakarta have resisted for 50 years. Outside journalists are rarely given visas. These pictures were taken secretly by Australia's ABC network. It follows the death in June of Marco Tambuni, leader of the main peaceful separatist movement, the KNBP. Those who were with him say he was shot by police.
He was shot in the leg. He was shot but still tried to escape. Then they shot him in the torso.
The death of Marco Tambuni provoked riots. The Indonesian authorities say he was armed and had a record of violence, a claim denied by his lawyer.
Those responsible for crimes against activists, those responsible for Marco's death, have to be investigated and dealt with in accordance with the law.
The separatists accused the government of using an elite anti-terrorist force set up by Britain, the United States and Australia against them. Victor Yemo is the new face of the independence movement. Speaking at a safe house, he says the authorities won't stop until their campaign is crushed.
They want to kill us in West Papua. You can go around here and you can see, every day you can see military. We know that Indonesia wants us to be lost from this land. We know it.
Amnesty International believes around 100,000 Papuans have died in this conflict since the 1960s. But the Indonesian government says it acts within the law and has a right to exert control over its own sovereign territory. West Papua has parallels with East Timor. Both have struggled against Indonesian control. East Timor won its freedom. Divided and dangerous West Papua is almost forgotten. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, in Sydney.
So this became an issue about 2 months ago again, when West Papuans jumped over the fence at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta, and they were seeking asylum. And Tony Abbott was meeting with the Indonesian president. What do you think Tony Abbott said to the media when he left that meeting? So the media said, how do you feel about the issue in West Papua? And almost word for word, that's what he said. He said, we have respect for Indonesia's sovereignty. We respect their right to make decisions about their own territory. Yes. Now, at some point, you have to have some moral authority, I think, as well. And if you see something bad happening, say so. But in this case, they're one of our closest neighbours. They've got 250 million people. They're incredibly important for trade. He doesn't want to aggravate one of our closest neighbours. And this is an internal conflict in Indonesia. I'll move on to the next one. External. So borders can be challenged externally. And this is the South China Sea. And there's been a dispute for about a decade now. And pretty much it's all China's fault. China is getting more and more powerful. It wants to be seen as more powerful. So the way it's doing that is spreading its huge navy around Asia. And so it's decided it wants to claim everything inside this red line as a part of China. Now that would be fine if other states, this wasn't taking territory away from all these other states. So this territory here is Indonesia's, this territory is Malaysia's, Brunei's, the Philippines have a very large chunk, and Vietnam. So what we have is an external threat to territory and borders.
So they don't want to take any land in terms of sea.
Well, there are islands inside that land, but it's the resources.
How can they be
Oil wells, gas wells, fisheries, all of those resources are dollars and cents.
Yeah, how do they think they're entitled to that? Like, how do they say, like,
what they've done is, they've grabbed some of these smaller islands, and so once they've grabbed the island, they then put the 250-kilometre circle around that island. And then down here they grab another one, they put a 250-kilometre circle around it. But in the world of global affairs, if you have the military, that's the ballgame. And they've got the second biggest navy in the world after the US. And this is on their doorstep. There was a question. So this is an example of sovereignty of these states being challenged externally by China. And there is, it's an ongoing, it's an ongoing dispute. They haven't settled it. There have been no direct military confrontations, but the Chinese Navy is basically sailing up and down that whole region. It seems like basically China's going to win the battle because they've already started setting up new cities, because they just create new cities, and their Navy has control. Now it gets tricky because the US is moving back into the region as well.
Look, that cuts out all of Brunei's sea.
Yeah. It's Brunei. Come on. That's right. You're right. It's a threat to their sovereignty. It challenges the ordered world of international affairs. A short video.
A pleasure to have you with us. We got some reaction from China's foreign ministry spokesperson saying that China firmly...
So, I'll pause this. The guy on the right you're going to get to know, you'll be referencing him in most of your essays. He's close to the most respected foreign minister in the world. He's the Indonesian foreign minister, and he is just brilliant. We're going to listen to him a fair bit throughout the year, but he's brilliant. He's such a good diplomat, and he puts our diplomats to shame. Anyway, I'll let him.
Opposes any country having nothing to do with the South China Sea issue getting involved in this dispute. What do you think of China's reaction to this possible joint ASEAN-US statement in terms of disputes in that area?
Not surprising, I think, to put it that way. We have been aware of China's position on this matter, but at the same time, the fact of life is that the issues on the South China Sea needs resolution in one way or the other. Probably there is some discussion about whether this be done bilaterally or in another setting. But Indonesia, through ASEAN, is keen to ensure we have conditions conducive for talks, for negotiations to take place, so that the various overlapping claims on the South China Sea can be resolved by peaceful means.
Minister Natalegawa, you know, we have a dispute taking place between China and Japan over the capture of this fishing boat captain in disputed waters between Japan and China. What does this development and this dispute raise in terms of concerns for ASEAN countries and in their own territorial dispute with China?
Well, it reminds all of us that we cannot take for granted the relatively benign atmosphere we've had for many decades now in the Asia-Pacific region that has enabled our countries, all our countries, to develop economically and to pursue prosperity. In other words, we must ensure that we continue to invest in various ways and means to allow for peaceful solutions of problems. And now we are having this latest episode between China and Japan. We hope the two countries can find ways and means to solve the matter amicably. Of course, countries in ASEAN, including Indonesia, would be keen to ensure, again, we have that conditions conducive for such a peaceful resolution. We have no interest whatsoever to see our region being troubled or being destabilized by episodes of this type.
So he's making it clear he doesn't want it to turn into a military conflict. It's all about peaceful resolution, peaceful resolution, peaceful resolution, which is going to be hard when you have a state as large as China being the bully in the region. Okay, no. Because, well, he's good at what he does. He's helped shape Indonesia into a peaceful force in the region rather than an aggressive force. So Indonesia spends very little on their military. They haven't invaded any other states in the last 30 or 40 years, whereas I think our average is like one a year.
Our average?
Yeah, it's pretty good. We send our troops everywhere. Our troops are all over the world. And he's also had this strong emphasis on peace in the region. So he could very easily have changed his rhetoric then and been anti-China, China is a bully. Instead, it was always about respect. When he goes in the media, it's not about inflaming situations. You can't say the same for other diplomats. They get on the media, they open their trap and cause trouble. All right, I want us to do one question on internal and external challenges, and I might walk you through how to organise that answer, because it's going to be a longer question, and I might do that in Word.